because he has to leave very quickly for a flight to Tunisia, and so I'll moderate the panel on his behalf.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm so sorry I have to leave, but I'm off to Tunis, and my mind is constantly shifting now to the trip ahead, and we're a little bit behind schedule. So the title of the panel is Political Islam and Democracy, a 45-year retrospective. I think that gives us 1 minute per year, or something like that, to cover. It's a big, subject in and of itself. You have a great panel, and they will be introduced momentarily. Many of them are friends who I've never seen. Some of them I get to see regularly. So it's great to sort of be just back in the room, right? Isn't that just so special? I was going to say that one of the things we haven't done at this conference so far is define what democracy is. This hasn't been yet a definition of what we mean by democracy. And while I recognize that democracy is a contested subject, if it's contested to the point where we all disagree about what it means, that's problematic. We can't stretch the term to mean anything we want it to mean. It has to have some sort of content. So I'm going to put out there a definition or a way to think about democracy. It's not my own. I stole it from a man named Philip Schmitter, but I think it's very useful. And Philip Schmitter and his wife, Carolyn Terry, a long time ago in an article entitled What Democracy Is and Is Not, and I use it in all my democracy courses at Georgetown, where for 14 years I directed Democracy and Governance Studies, the MA program. I almost always start with that one piece. And the basic argument of that piece is democracy is a system of institutions, norms, rules, values, laws, constitutions that basically prevent the political exclusion of any group that agrees to practice politics peacefully. In other words, democracy is a system that excludes exclusion. If democracy and the ballot and elections become a vehicle by which victors exclude the opposition permanently from ever holding power, that's no longer democracy. It's what we call electoral autocracy. It's something other than what we'd otherwise call constitutional democracy. Democracy means accepting the notion that no one can be excluded from the political arena and that everybody has a shot at some point or other at political power. And that means, of course, as Schmitter argued a long time ago, that the premise of democracy is uncertainty within certain kinds of boundaries, right? It has to be uncertain. What autocrats love is certainty. They love elections because they assume they'll win them, and therefore they're happy to have elections. When we cross from a situation in which you have an election in which an elected leader uses his majority in the parliament and or his executive power or her executive powers to impose his or her will on the opposition as a sustained political reality, we're no longer in the zone of democracy, are we? So one can question whether, in fact, Erdogan's victory was the victory for democracy, because he's crossed into a zone whereby he sees democracy as a majoritarian political system in which he is going to impose his will, regardless of what the opposition says or does, right? So I think that's to me, I think, a good working definition. So I suppose if we're here, and I'll pose the question and scoot out of here, I'm sorry. That's great, I'm just going to run and hide. I suppose if we're thinking about the perennial, endless question of Islam and democracy, which a subject I think we've gone over many times, I think the fundamental question here is how and what ways does the question of Islam and democracy play into sustaining a political system in which excludes exclusion? I think that's a useful way. And beyond that, I'll just say, I'll wrap up here. And I published a piece a long time ago in which I said Islam is not the question and not the solution. And you may be familiar with it. It's part of the equation, but it's not the question, it's not the solution. The bigger question is, where does Islam, and particularly in the Middle East, fit in over struggles for identity? Identity struggles, which autocrats have instrumentalized, have used in ways that are designed to hold them in power. And how do you go from that sort of manipulation of identity struggles, which autocrats are quite adept at doing, and they always have in that sense constituencies, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. So how do we go from that sort of game, which is really a kind of mafioso game, how do we go from that kind of game to a democratic game in which you sort of rewrite the rules so you can't exclude via democracy? And the question would be, therefore, how do these sort of identity struggles which include but are not reduced to Islam or Islamism. How do those identity struggles fit in? So how about that for a topic? We can, I think, if we have a good 3 or 4 hours, I think we can have that discussion. But thank you very much. I'm so sorry I can't hang around, but I got to get on that plane and I got to read this New Yorker piece as well. Thank you very much. I'm going to Tunis, yes. And I better come back from Tunis. That's fine.